For the past 20 plus years, the New York Knicks have been the laughingstock of the NBA. Since making a surprise finals run as the 8th seed in 1999, the Knicks have only made the playoffs 6 times in 21 seasons, with a 6-year drought from 2004 to 2010 and a 7-year drought from 2013 to 2020. As a lifelong Knicks fan, this team has dragged fans like me through the mud and have almost never shown any signs of life as a competent organization. So how, after going a measly 21-45 last year, good for 12th place in the Eastern Conference, are the Knicks 10 games over 500, clinched a top 4 seed in the East, and made the playoffs for the first time since 2013? The answer begins with the trade of Kristaps Porzingis, but includes many twists and turns along the way. Here is the improbable rebirth of the New York Knicks. After a couple years of mediocrity following their 2013 playoff berth as a 2 seed, New York found itself with the 4th pick in the 2015 draft. The Knicks selected big man Kristaps Porzingis to a serenade of boos and crying kids. Many fans were shocked and angered about the selection, since they didn't know who the pick was.
Who the f*** is this? Who the f*** is Tingus Pingus? I never heard of Lativia!
However, KP quickly proved a lot of people wrong, and expectations were high for the 7'3" center as he went from being seen as a major project to being the franchise cornerstone. The results were looking good, as Porzingis showed flashes of excellence during his rookie campaign, averaging over 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks in 72 games. He steadily improved his game over the next 2 seasons, culminating in his lone All-Star appearance in 2018, when he shot his scoring average up to 22.7 points, and had 6.6 rebounds and 2.4 blocks, as well as shooting 39% from 3. However, the injury bug persisted over the seasons, as being a 7'3" slender big man can take its toll on the body. Kristaps was limited to only 28 games in his All-Star season after tearing his ACL. Coupling this with his vocal dismay in Knicks leadership, Porzingis soon wanted out. The Knicks obliged the Latvian's wishes and traded him to the Dallas Mavericks in the 2019 offseason. Right away, many people around the league viewed the trade as a steal for the Mavericks, as they would be able to pair KP with future All-NBA superstar Luka Doncic to form one of the best young duos in the league. Questions arose around the Knicks conducting malpractice yet again, as yet another young draftee failed to sign a second contract with the team. These people had every right to question Dolan and the Knicks, considering their horrendous track record over the past 2 decades. Yet, the Knicks had their own motives for making this trade. In the summer of 2019, several high-caliber free agents were on the market. Elite one-name superstars like Durant, Irving, Kawhi, and Butler made for one of the most intriguing free agency classes in recent memory. By trading away Porzingis, who was due for a significant pay raise, along with Tim Hardaway Jr.'s bloated contract, the Knicks cleared up over $70 million in cap space. This cap space was expected to be used to try and lure 2 max spots in free agency. The 2 highest names on the Knicks wish list were Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. The superstar pair had become close friends over the years, and everyone expected them to team up that summer. Where they would end up was unknown, but many in the media claimed that the Knicks would be the winners of the sweepstakes. Part of the allure for KD and Kyrie to sign here was that the Knicks had the worst record in the league in 2018, and therefore were tied for the best odds of landing the first pick in the draft, for the rights to none other than Xanos himself, Zion Williamson. One of the most hyped up prospects in recent memory, Zion was thought to be a generational talent and the presumptive number 1 pick even before he played a season at Duke. So with the possibility of landing a big 3 in Zion, Durant, and Irving, dopey Knicks fans like myself salivated at this potential, and we weren't the only ones doing so. National media across the country predicted a big 3 would land in New York. But then, the draft lottery happened.
The 3rd pick goes to the New York Knicks.
By falling yet again in the draft lottery, this time to the 3rd overall pick, the Knicks not only missed out on Zion, but also uber-talented Murray State point guard Ja Morant. It felt like it was a crushing blow in the hopes of getting Durant and Irving. Regardless, New York had to worry about the future later, and still had the big decision to make with who to take with a 3rd overall pick. That part was easy, as the Knicks chose the former number 1 high schooler in the world, Zion's teammate at Duke, RJ Barrett. RJ found himself in the shadow of Zion's hype the entire year they spent together, but Barrett was still a lock at number 3 coming into the draft.
Thank you. Yo, I'm a Knick. What?
So alas, there still was hope that the Knicks could land the dynamic duo of KD and Kyrie, just with Rowan instead of Zion. But then, July 1st came. The Knicks not only lost out on Durant and Irving, but they did so to their crosstown rivals, the Brooklyn Nets. They also missed out on other big names, such as Kawhi and Jimmy, and it was a crushing blow and yet another failure in trying to lure big name players to the Big Apple. It seemed like the final nail in the free agency coffin for the moribund franchise. So since Plan A was a wash, operations had to turn around fast. In a drastic shift of plans, the Knicks looked elsewhere in the free agency market and signed their biggest name of the offseason, Julius Randle. New York was scoffed at and laughed at vigorously for the move, along with the signing of 27 other power forwards. It was typical lol Knicks missing out on prime free agents and instead left to sign the others off the scrap heap. However, Randle was no scrub. He was fresh off a season with the Pelicans in which he averaged near 21 points and 9 rebounds. It was more so that he ended up being the most talented player that the Knicks got that offseason. All in all, the 2019 Knicks roster consisted of some meh young players, a few veterans, a rookie RJ Barrett, and a first-time leading man in Julius Randle. In other words, it wasn't looking pretty heading into the season. Their main catch, Julius, ended up being the focal point of the team, and, well, he produced a lot of this. Nonetheless, there were a few bright spots during that season, such as second-year center Mitchell Robinson's steady development as a rebounder and shot blocker. Robinson actually ended up breaking Wilt Chamberlain's record for the highest field goal percentage in a single season. Also, RJ Barrett struggled with this shot early, but still had a ton of poise and grit for a 19-year-old. Lastly, one-year signee Marcus Morris surprisingly leapt into a near 20-point scorer and was the Knicks' go-to scorer down the stretch. Side note, thank you Marcus for those 2 Dallas wins against Tingus Pingus. Other than those few silver linings, things were looking typically downhill for the Knicks all season long. That was until a few big front office changes were finally made. The first domino to fall was head coach David Fizdale. Fizz was in his second season of coaching the team, and there was no progress to be found anywhere. The team had no direction and were getting blown out by the best teams in the league on a nightly basis. I mean, just look at this man, smiling while down 40, embarrassing. Fizdale was replaced by interim coach Mike Miller, who closed out the miserable season for the Knickerbockers, and provided some quality memes in dark times. The next major piece to go was longtime front office executive Steve Mills. Mills was behind a number of disastrous moves by the Knicks over the past decade, and it was a move that was long overdue. These 2 firings were a breath of fresh air for the franchise, but the key would be in how they would replace them moving forward. So to replace Mills, Dolan reached out to former CAA agent Leon Rose. Leon came into town with plenty of rapport and connections as an agent, most notably with LeBron James before James left CAA to start Clutch Sports. Rose brought along his close friend and confidant, William Worldwide West, as VP to help with personnel moves. The pair quickly established themselves as a new, low-key, behind-the-scenes regime that the Knicks hadn't seen in years. The first move of the Rose presidency was at the trade deadline, where they traded Knicks leading scorer Marcus Morris. Leon orchestrated a masterful 3-team deal in which the Morris twin was sent to the Clippers in exchange for Mo Harkless, a 2020 first-round pick, a protected 2021 first-round swap, and Detroit's 2021 second-round pick. All that for a player who was on a walk year in a 1-year deal. Not bad for your first move as team president. After the pandemic ended the season short, the Knicks found themselves 24 games under 500. It was a terrible season for New York, but the future started to look a bit brighter with more draft capital under smarter management. So the next big move for Leon and Dolan was to find their new head coach. In 2020, the Knicks got theirs in Tom Thibodeau. The burly veteran head coach had been out of a job in the NBA since getting fired from the Timberwolves in 2019, but he came to the Knicks with an excellent track record of winning basketball and stout defense. With the new president and coach under wraps, New York turned their eyes into the draft and free agency. In the draft, the Knicks selected Obi Toppin with the 8th pick and used one of the picks they got from the Marcus Morris trade to move up in the first and select Kentucky point guard Immanuel Quickley. I personally love the IQ pick as a late first round selection. The Knicks have always lacked a consistent 3-point shooting threat and Quickley excelled at that in college. Although I love the pick, some people in the media viewed the pick as, well, otherwise. In free agency this time around, the team had a coherent plan and knew what type of players they were looking for to fit into Coach Tibbs' system. Veteran signings such as Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel demonstrated that the Knicks were seeking out two-way players that were known for having a defensive edge at their positions. Overall, it just felt like the front office was finally competent for the first time in a long while, and that they had a plan and were sticking to the plan. Going into the 2020 season, there weren't too many expectations for the team. At best, they were projected to be slightly under 500. After all, they were 24 games under the prior season, so expecting a huge leap into playoff contention seemed out of the realm of possibility. Julius Randle was also coming off a frustrating season as a first option. RJ showed massive holes in his game, and the rest of the roster was either inexperienced or underwhelming. Regardless of what people thought, the Knicks put in the work during the offseason and came into 2020 with a renewed sense of optimism and focus. Under Coach Tibbs' patented stingy defense, the Knicks were in a lot of close games to start the season, including a couple surprising victories early on against the Bucks and Jazz. As a diehard fan, you could just tell this team was different than last year's, despite the limited number of significant changes to the roster. In the first 2 months of the season, Randle started to look like the man that was paid to be the main guy. His Beyblade tendencies were beginning to be in the rearview mirror, and his play drastically improved, as a shooter and a ball handler. By the end of January, the Knicks were actually playing 500 ball, which of course is a marked improvement from the previous 7 seasons. However, as good as their defense was, their offense struggled at times, and they were relying too heavily on Randle to carry the offensive load. At some point, this type of workload wasn't going to be sustainable, and worries of Coach Tibbs' penchant for overworking his star players were beginning to creep back up. So, to help out, Leon the Don looked to a familiar friend for Coach Tibbs, and he pulled off his second brilliant trade when he acquired D. Rose from the Pistons for Dennis Smith Jr. and 2 second-round picks. After this trade, the Knicks found their 6th man and a person to carry the offense when Julius is off the court and Elfrod Payton stinks up the joint to start the game. The first few weeks took a little adjusting for Rose, but the former MVP finally found his footing after coming off the COVID list. In April, everything finally started to click for the overachieving Knicks. New York went on a 9-game winning streak, which tied their second longest winning streak in the past 25 years. It was a feeling that I hadn't personally experienced in ages. Jubilation from watching the Knicks play winning basketball. With a combination of a top 5 defense and clutch play down the stretch by D. Rose, Randle, RJ, Burks, Bullock, and IQ, the Knicks catapulted themselves from a play-in team to the 4th seed in the East. With a more than 30-game record differential from the previous season, the 2020-2021 New York Knicks are one of the biggest surprises in the NBA in the last decade. Under the shrewd management of Leon Rose, Worldwide Wes, and Scott Perry, the reinvigorating coaching of Tom Thibodeau, the All-NBA play of King Julius, and the overall competitive spirit of the Big 15, the Knicks finally have a bright future. More pressingly, they are a bona fide playoff team this season and will surely be a tough out for any opponent, Brooklyn, Philly, and Milwaukee included. Even if they get bounced in the first round, nothing can take away from what a miraculous turnaround this team has endured over the course of a year. In my opinion, if you're looking back at what the catalyst was for this change, it goes back to the Porzingis trade and the significant moves that have happened since then. Without Dennis Smith Jr., perhaps the Knicks couldn't trade for Derrick Rose. And certainly the signings of Randle and Morris couldn't have happened with Kristaps locked up long term. The Morris deal helped lead to the drafting of Immanuel Quickley, and not to mention the fact that the Knicks still have both of Dallas's firsts in 2021 and 2023. Overall, it's been one of the best Knicks trades in the last 20 years. As a diehard Knicks fan who is used to losing and suffering, this season has been nothing short of surreal. This is a team full of hardworking, low-key, lovable guys that really do embody the New York spirit in a way that the franchise hasn't seen since the late 90s and early 2000s. They play hard for each other and their coach, and the coach and management seem to have an understanding of one another and what they need to succeed. It's all a sign of a well-run operation, and as fans like me screaming, we're finally doing things the right way. Although we missed out on drafting Zion, as well as signing KD and Kyrie in 2019, The future has never been brighter for the New York Knicks. It's a start of something new in the Mecca, and for the first time in years, I can't wait to see what comes next.